helping if the phones are able to help us reduce FTAs once people get those phones. The program just hasn't been up long enough for us to really have a general idea of the success. But there is a work group that's been working on that with a lot of the stakeholders that are specifically engaged in this. And we met on Monday and talked about this quite a bit. So we're hopeful that we can get data, but we'll probably run out of the funds before that. Before Maggie left, she was able to get the MacArthur Foundation to agree to move our travel budget that would have been used to go to our in-person meeting that was pivoted to virtual. And so we've supplemented with those funds, but still that's not a huge number. So we're struggling to find some longevity in this program, but initial results from speaking anecdotally from individuals seem to indicate that it is making some sort of a difference. We just don't have a quantifiable number for you at this point, Sheriff.
All right. Just with that in mind, what would you say the biggest weakness of the program is? Because listening to what you just said, I would say sustainability would be one of the biggest weaknesses, sustainable funding. And I guess we need to try to figure out what that means. How much money per year, if we're, if this program is found to be useful, how do we sustain it? What would be the budget necessary for the city and the county and the city of the valley, basically the main three players, because you are the main funders of much of this. What would that look like? Do you have any idea, or is that something that we should ask the budget offices or pretrial service and the city side, their component, to give us a report on that?
So, Sheriff, most of the budget information is going to flow through the Office of Law and Justice because this is a MacArthur grant item, and they've been administrating it. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about sustainability. This was launched as a pilot as part of a MacArthur grant to see if it would show a difference and help us get down our FTA rate. As you can probably see from the list that Karen has put up there, almost all of the strategies that we put into this last funding on our MacArthur grant are really focused around FTA, failures to appear, failures to appear, failures to appear. How do we really drive down that number? So I think you're right, sustainability, figuring out, is there a want from our local funders beyond MacArthur to keep this program going? I know that on the city side, we've had some conversations about reaching out to city council to ask about continuing that funding for us. We know that they're going to ask for data, and so we're not there yet. But I think that that's exactly right. One of the things that we've learned, Candace Aguirre was just explaining to me this morning, that we had an initial real big bump in requests for these phones, but now that they are in the hands of individuals, we're not seeing the same amount of requests. We're having people ask for additional minutes as their cases progress through the system, but we're not having the big rush. So I think that we're learning a little bit about the ebbs and flows of the requests as the program matures a little bit. I think our main struggle is going to be that we're probably going to run out of funds before it gets to the point where we're going to have a lot of data.
All right. Again, since this is a pilot, it's being funded by the grant. If the grant funding is running short on getting us a good picture of if the program is successful, I'm not opposed to us making, as a the council, making a request from the major funders of the system to give us another 6 months worth of funds past the grant funding, so we can find out if this is truly working. Because if it's really working, I'd hate to see us dismantle it just because we didn't have any funding. So what I guess I'm going to ask then, and this is slightly interesting because Candace's last day is going to be the 18th, because we do need to have an employee assigned to these projects that help us navigate some of this. I'm going to put this on my to-do list to find out how we're going to manage these programs without staff, unless, Mike, you're willing to have maybe Karen, since she has a lot of good information and background in this, if she could help us with that.
You bet, Sheriff. And it's Karen is probably the most vested in it. She's been here since Jackie Van Warmer was here. She's worked on all of these initiatives and understands, some of the deadlines and those things. I'm sorry we're losing Candace, but I think that in the interim, that Karen will be able to fill in and take care of that portion for us. And just so everyone knows that I recently accepted a job as the Senior Director of Law and Justice. And the new role, one of the things that rolls under that responsibility is Maggie's office and the MacArthur Foundation. So I'll be working closely with you along with Karen on these, Ozzy, as we move forward. And so I'm looking forward to it. I know some of these initiatives are very good ones. And I think that together and with a large amount of communication that we can move some of these forward. So.
All right, with that in mind, then, Mike, I will be touching base with you because I would really like to figure out the budget problem for this program. How do we maximize the funding that MacArthur has given us, and at the same time request help from the big three in the area to help it last long enough so we can actually evaluate it. And Tim and Justin, I'm going to ask you this question. What time frame do you think is necessary for that? How long should we be looking at for this program to give it an honest shot?
Sheriff, I think it's going to take a little bit of time. It hasn't been up and running very long. I think Candace can correct me, but I believe October, November is when we really started rolling this out. So your idea of 6 months is probably a really good idea, because it's going to take a little bit of time to see trends. Because I think one of the things we were really wanting to see is, once someone has a cell phone in hand, what's the difference in their FTA rate before they got it and then after they received it. And unfortunately, as we all know, our case processing time around here, as well as most anywhere in the country, is a period of not weeks, but months. So we probably do need have a period of time to see that. So, having, I hate to say bridge funding, but funding to supplement until we decide if this is something that we want to move from pilot to just a standard part of our work would be a really good idea. So I personally, from someone being involved in the MacArthur work, I appreciate your suggestion. I think it's a good one.
All right, Tim, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with Justin. I'm sorry, I thought we were on the uptrust issue. I see it's 5 more down, then we get to uptrust. All built around FTAs. That is the biggest issue, as Justin well explained. That's the problem that we see at the courts is just getting people to appear. And that's what's causing all these warrants. So the uptrust, that program was basically public defenders notifying with text messaging their defendants on when to appear in court. Then the idea was maybe at some point we could add LFOs into that too and notify the defendant on when their LFOs are doing how much. So I agree with Justin. These are extremely effective programs. And I think the data will show it if we give them time to work through and the idea is to build commonality, to build a standard process among folks that get these. So if they get them in a couple of months, they'll still going to be trying to figure out what they're supposed to be doing with them. I think we give them some time. 6 months is a good start.
All right. And folks, you've heard me say this a few times over the last several decades, it feels like. One of the biggest problems with the blueprint for reform was it never came with any funding. A lot of good ideas in there, but there was never any funding actually allocated or dedicated. I believe that, and this is my perspective, and you guys can weigh in. My perspective is, if we're finding a program that's working, we have to work towards sustainable, dedicated funding so they are meaningful. If we don't, they will die. As soon as MacArthur leaves, these programs will go away and we'll be back to square one. The goal should never be to build something based on grant funding. If we have to look towards the future, we have to build that sustainable funding arm. Carmen, I see you have a hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Sheriff. I was just going to add that there are government and state programs that provide cell phone and free minutes for individuals who are indigent, sorry about that. And that we should be looking at, partnering with those to reduce cost and reduce the burden of the funding coming out of county funds. And also from, a lived perspective as somebody, not only as a service provider working with individuals that are currently in the court system, and as a formerly incarcerated individual, I mean, people are not going to come to court because you send them a reminder because of that. If you look at the people that are being swept up, that are being cited and that have the high FTAs, they're individuals that are experiencing addiction, they're homeless, they don't have the stability, and they don't care if they go to court or not, because they know if they go to court, they're going to go to jail. So what we should be thinking about and trying to envision is working with community-based organizations that already have the relationship with those people and looking at incentives to get those people thinking differently about what the court looks like and the importance and accountability and all of those other things, as opposed to just giving them a phone, because they're going to lose that phone. That phone's going to get stolen. It's going to be destroyed. It's going to be trashed when, police do sweeps of homeless camps. So it's really a waste of time. This just my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you for the perspective. All right, Candace, could you put the list back up? We'll go to the next one.
Sheriff, would you like for me to just go through the ones on the MacArthur list, which are up front? I can do them a little faster than the last one, so we can go through those.
That will work.
Move it along. I know this is something Maggie would have done if she were here. I see Judge Maurer's got her hand up. I don't know if you want to touch base with her before I proceed.
Sure. Judge Maurer?
And actually, I just wanted to comment on actually the next topic, which was the rideshare pilot, which Justin will cover. But I think from the statistics that I've seen, it's pretty new from November, starting November 21. There were 12 individuals and 46 rides in December. There were 42 individuals in January and 122 rides provided. So the rate of rides more than doubled, and the rate of individuals seeking rides more than tripled. And the statistics that I got would break out to, on average, those rides cost $13.58, and those are rides to court. So, I guess the inference is, had those folks not had a ride, a warrant very well could have been issued if they didn't appear to court. So that $13.50 to get them there is really a nominal investment. And what we're seeing is between the month that was implemented in November or December and then January, the use of that has more than doubled and tripled. So I think those are really positive numbers, at least from our perspective, in terms of that program, at least kicking.
Your Honor, I guess I have a question on that one also. Looking at the sheet, and Justin, I'm sure you can weigh in on this one, because it's going to be the same question I had on the last one. It appears that we have $42,000 in change to keep that one running. However, at the current burn rate, you have maybe and with the growth rate, you have maybe a month and a half left of funding that will sustain that, especially if you continue to grow the program, if you will. Is this all grant funded also?
It is. I think the interest that I would have to see is, I think, you know, when I heard Carmen's comments about the cell phone program, and I think that, you know, those are, you know, there's some reality there, and ultimately what may happen with those phones. But I also think that one of the things to consider in giving phones to folks is, I think we have this idea of courts, you know, if they're coming down to the courthouse, then the court's work being done. But more and more, the court system is trying to provide Zoom hearings for folks, so they actually are able to not come to the courthouse. They can go out on their breaks at work. They can do it from their home. And so having that cell phone also provides them with the infrastructure to actually come to court if they don't lose it or get destroyed. But likewise, with the rideshare pilot, I mean, the flip side of that coin is, how much does a warrant cost in the system if the court had to issue a warrant? And I would guess it's more than $13.50. So, I mean, is there built-in sustainable funding? No, this is being funded, you know, via the MacArthur grant money, but the real, you know, there's a component of a savings component that I think potentially we can see more clearly when we actually see people utilizing the rideshare program to actually get to court.
Right.
That's exactly right. I think the only thing I would add is on that particular issue that the burn rate actually isn't that bad. We invested $45,000 and we, I think, have only used around 3,000 so far because the rides are so inexpensive. That number will increase, as you correctly pointed out, because it's becoming more known. This program not only helps people get to court, but it additionally helps them get to their public defender appointments as well as treatment. So we have a work group on this, and we go through the different requests from Pioneer, who is running this for us, on what are allowable locations that they can dispatch Uber rides out to. And so we've really grown that to most of the treatment providers that provide court-ordered treatment to individuals involved in the system. One of the last suggestions that we had at one of our meetings was that we could possibly also, as well as Uber, additionally buy bus passes, because some people are more accustomed and more comfortable riding on the STA. And so that's something we're also considering.
Right. I see what you're saying, Justin. I didn't read that chart correctly. You started with 45,000 and you have 42,000 left. So technically, you've got a good few years maybe at this rate, but hopefully we can expand it and go from there. But it will always, sustainable funding is something we should always be looking towards. And this would be one of those, if it's working as well as it seems, we should take a look at that. Go ahead, Justin. You wanted to cover the ones we can quickly.
The next ones, the explainer videos, Sheriff, are something that we have done previously using MacArthur funds. We contracted to have a series of explainer videos put together to discuss the system, how it works, essentially how-to videos. Those have been put up on the website, the Law and Justice website. And so that project is ongoing. I can just go down this, the blue list if you want.
Go ahead.
So the microgrant initiative is a program that we use MacArthur funds. We contract with Better Health Together to serve as a partner and physical agent to administer this. It's a collaborative selection process where compassionate addiction treatment and WSU and the health district were selected as microgrant recipients. They are then going to work to use these grants for different programs within the community. I have not been involved in that particular project. I'm not sure if anyone else on this call has, I know that Tom Krasinski and Judge Moreno was sort of the ones leading that on the core team. But this was part of our efforts to not just fund our internal programs, but to reach out and have more of a touch with those MacArthur dollars outside of the actual sort of walls of the criminal justice system.
Okay, so I guess a question I would have on that one is, and it's the same thing that I stated before. Director Sparber, we're going to need to coordinate with whoever is actually working that and monitoring that program, so we can take a look at its current status. Or Tom, do you, or Justin, do you know what the current status is? Is it up and running? Are they providing anything? Because I see the initial funding, but I don't see anything as far as expenditures that have gone out.
So that would probably be a question for Candace if she has them. That is housed within the Office of Law and Justice. And so at some point, as Mike was suggesting, that will be subsumed by his efforts as the new director. So at this point, I don't know the exact numbers. I'm not sure Candace has them offhand as to what has been sent out on the microgrants and what where we are in that process.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll let Mike get his feet wet, and then by maybe the next meeting, he can give us an idea of the status of that. And so, Justin, you want to do with the Criminal Justice Information Hotline?
Yes, Sheriff. The Criminal Justice Information Hotline has a mix of funding. Some of it was certainly the MacArthur grant. It's a funding that has associates that staff a hotline for a period of time, usually Sundays through Fridays. They answer incoming calls with questions about courts, upcoming court dates, and they also make reminder calls. They've been doing this on behalf of district court. They've engaged with conversations with Judge Logan about possibly expanding it to municipal court as well as district. The hotline has provided a few bits of information about their effectiveness. It appears as though what they're seeing, Sheriff, is when they make actual contact with the individual, not leaving a message and saying you have a court date, but actually having a conversation with the person, that they've got pretty good show rates. But the issue has become that many of the people, the information that we receive in the criminal justice system, that information is out of date. Cell phones have been disconnected, letters are returned, etc. But when they do make contact, the response and the results is actually pretty promising. So that is something that has, I guess, it is ongoing. I'm not exactly sure of sort of if we've determined if that's got good efficacy or not. I see Judge Maurer has her hand up. She can probably talk to this issue because it's directly with her court.
Okay.
And that's correct, Justin. Where there's contact made, the numbers that I have is, I believe, between 42 to 43% actually relates to a hearing held rate. So that means those folks responded and a hearing was held. When the individual does have private counsel, that does bump up a little bit to 49%. But again, I think those numbers in the conversations that I were involved in when those numbers were provided, I think that's what kind of spurred Superior Court's interest in it. And I think at the time, Judge Moreno was also involved in those conversations, and there was some interest in potentially Superior Court looking at that as well. So I agree, where contact made, it's, you know, we can translate that definitely to hearing held rate.
Okay, and funding, does it have a funding arm, or how are we operating this?
I believe this is MacArthur grant funding, and I'm not exactly sure if there's anything coming from the county side at this point. But I think everything that the group sees in blue, when you see MacArthur funding, you have to assume that any of that is theoretically ending at the end of the year, because that's the end of our grant cycle.
Okay, so it'd be another thing we'd have to look at, sustainable funding.
And I'll try to identify those, Sheriff, when I get an opportunity to do so.
And Mike, when you're looking at that, also look at it with an eye to what part of the criminal justice system these should actually reside in. I see some of this as pretrial services. I see some as other areas that they're sustainable funding and actually their ultimate home would reside.
You got it, Sheriff.
All right. Data analyst.
Yes, Sheriff. The data analyst, Diane Lundquist, she works out of the Office of Law and Justice. She is half funded by MacArthur and half funded from county general funds. Diane is the reason that we have the data dashboard that's been well received from the system. It really provides more up-to-date and really detailed information about who's in jail, what they're held on. It was one of the last requests from our last round, not this round, but the previous round of funding, that we really wanted to focus from our MacArthur money on transparency within the system. And her funding is part of that. She's really the catalyst on getting that data out in a way that we can understand. So the data analyst and data dashboard on that list go together. The dashboard provides jail population data. It's publicly available. It's pretty in-depth. I know that I've heard sort of a double-edged sword on that. A lot of people really like it because you can really dive in and see a lot of the data. I've had a couple of people tell me that, yes, it's pretty awesome, but it's also pretty overwhelming because of the amount of data. But it's something that we were striving for. And our last round of MacArthur funding was to really show that we have data and we're going to provide that out to the public. And I know that Director Sparber's got his hand up because he can probably dive a little deeper into those two issues.
Yeah, Sheriff, I would just echo what Justin's saying. She's proven to be a valuable asset towards all of the data that we research. Between her relationship with our jail person, Aaron Land, the two of them have been great at producing special reports, producing, like I said, the dashboard, coming together and doing a thorough, in-depth look at data and what the data is revealing. So I would be one too to say that we should look for efforts to try to sustain her role if at all possible.
I would also like to add that she will be the one taking over all my responsibilities until Director Sparber has a chance to kind of do his reorganization.
Okay. Mike, I make this next comment solely as a recommendation because it's your org. I would highly recommend going to the county CEO and since it's kind of a joint effort between city, county, and even ask the valley if we could start developing a revenue stream to bring a full-time employee in to do this work for your organization. That would be my request and my recommendation. That way we could take this one off the list here. And I truly believe that a data analyst is crucial. We need to be driven by empirical means rather than hypothetical means in what we're doing. So I would support you in going to the board and the two mayors, city councils of the big three requesting for funding to make this a permanent position.
Copy that. And that was kind of my intention as you started talking. This is really a regional approach. And so I think we need to address some of these regionally, and so even Justin was talking about the cell phone pilot and the city's conversations over that. And one of my goals would be kind of bringing, instead of a siloed thing, that we're bringing everybody to the table and trying to figure out some solutions for these. So point well taken.
Right. And the data dashboard is the same. Issues pretty much wrapped together. Justin, is there anything else that you can cover?
So there are two other things that are MacArthur funded, and I believe that Judge Maurer was going to touch on the equity impact assessment, and that was added to the race equity toolkit, I believe, was on the agenda. The only other thing, Sheriff, the only thing that really is on the MacArthur list is the supported release issue. As we all know, it was on the front page of the paper. There's a lot of concern out there that the foundation is, I guess, upset with Spokane about that. And as I told you earlier today, I'm willing to talk about that a little bit, because I've had some conversations as part of being a liaison for the core team with the foundation, since we don't have Maggie. And so I have actually spoken to the foundation and Vera, our TA group, in the last week about our struggles on that. And I guess, to quote Mark Twain, essentially the rumors of our demise within the eyes of MacArthur are greatly exaggerated. So if you wanted me to provide some information on that, I can.
I will. Let's have Judge Maurer speak to the equity impact assessment. And then I would like to make a recommendation to the group that we adopt the equity impact assessment as one of the guiding tools of all the decisions that we make as a council. So, Judge Maurer, floor is yours.
Thank you. I was thinking about this morning, and I was trying to remember how I actually got involved in the race equity assessment toolkit, because I'd set as initially the co-chair on the RED subcommittee, and then I kind of came off of that after my tenure and had some other focuses, and then I think Maggie must have reached out to me and asked me to work with the work group. And so, what the intent of the assessment toolkit is really designed to do is to enable, as policies and practices are being implemented, to kind of run those ideas through a sieve to determine whether there are any unintentional consequences that could come based on the policy or the practice that's being proposed. And I think part of the benefit of taking time out on the front end to do that work is that you don't implement a policy with really good intentions. I mean, and that's what I've seen within the criminal justice system. I can speak specifically as to the courts. And I shared this with Sheriff Knezovich in our discussions. As an example, the court system can think of lots of great policies and initiatives. One of them more recently was electronic filing of court documents. And, the reality is that had to be paid for in a way, this was an initiative across the state of Washington. And the idea was to, charge a filing fee. But really no work had been done to ask, what or how might that implement or practice, what are the effects of that? And so if you are able to, on the front side, have those conversations, you don't then implement a policy and then find out 3 months, 3 years, 10 years down the road, oh, there's all these negative impacts that we didn't intend. And so I think that was really the hope in being able to utilize this tool, is to just inform the decision-making process. It's something among other, elements of selecting a policy or procedure that those who are involved in doing that can use. It's not the end all and be all. It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to solve all the problems, but it certainly is an opportunity to sort of pointedly ask those questions. And so we tried to keep it user-friendly. There are 10 questions. And one of the things that I also appreciated about the tool is that it does specifically address race and equity disparity, but it also does talk about other inequities. So how might this also affect those on considerations of income, disability? So those are also things, we don't want to implement any policies that are going to ultimately have unfair consequences at the end of it. And so the judges of the district court have adopted this policy for any major or significant policies or practices that will be adopting at the discretion of the judges. And so my hope is that we can utilize this as well and find it to be useful as well as we move forward. Sure.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments to add to that? Because again, it would be my my motion, if you will, to adopt the tool as one of our guiding principles as we run things through.
Sheriff, I'm in strong support of that. I think it's a great idea. And I appreciate the work that Judge Maurer has done, and certainly appreciate your support as the chair to put this forward to the group.
All right.
And I,
With that, go ahead.
I would second the motion.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm going to do this the easier way. Anybody opposed? Hearing none opposed, I think we passed unanimously. Thank you very much. The rest of the programs that we have on the table, I'd like to take this off the agenda right now and put it back. And Mike, I'm going to put this back in your lap. Can you take a look at that list and in the next 3 weeks, send us a little white paper on each of those programs and let us know their status. And that way we can read it before our next meeting and then discuss some of the others, because that's quite a list to get through them in an hour. We're not going to do it. So can I trouble you to do that?
Yeah, and so, and we're speaking about current projects, Sheriff, not the past project as much, or do you want some information about the past ones as well?
I just need to know what the status of the past projects are. Are they currently being used? Were they shelved? You know, quite frankly, if we shelved them, I'd like to know why. If it was a funding issue, if the program, if we saw good results from it, but we shelved it because of funding, I'd like to know that.
Okay.
Because I don't like to see us just do programs and then kill them because of lack of funding. If we have a program that is working, I'd rather have that discussion with the financial arms of the region and make my case to get money to support them rather than just kill them. Now, if they went away because they were not effective, okay, just let us know that and we can move on and we can maybe learn from why they didn't work.
Okay. Yeah, I'll need the support of everybody that's here to go through it, just to understand where they're at and the direction they're headed. But yeah, I'll do my best on that, Sheriff. For you.
All right. The next bullet point, we really didn't get a chance in the last month to do a deep dive.
Ozzy,
Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make one quick comment. I apologize for busting in on this, but I'm preparing myself as a resident of Spokane Valley to ask my council people to jump in on this. Now, I know we have a representative here of outlying cities, and I don't want to really have any, I don't need any comments, but I want my outlying cities to prepare themselves for what we're going to ask them to do. My experience as involved in the programs in our jail, they come, my people come from all over, even our southern rural cities down by Rockford and of course Cheney and Airway Heights and Deer Park and all that. And I would really like to see Spokane Valley step up because I know we can afford it. But I think that's a conversation that I would ask Laura Patton to maybe run it by some people. I don't think there's an emergency on this, but I would like to prepare the outlying cities for what we were going to ask them to do, and I need to make sure that everybody knows about it. So that's all I have to say about that. Well, we've been talking about a lot of funding, and I think every city could step up just a little bit more. That's all I got. Thank you.
I agree with you, John. And I intend on making the rounds and talking to several of the outlying councils and let them know that, they're all part of this, and we could use their voice and help. So thank you
I
for that.
certainly don't have a problem joining with you. If you want somebody who's been in there with a rolled up sleeve for 5 straight years, 4 times a week, I'm the man to talk to. So
I'll take you up on that. So the next item is something that Justin mentioned. It's something that's on the front page of the paper. I received an email from Candace today saying that, the threat of this grant going away was a false statement. And I'm a little perturbed that our local media decided to do this story in the way it did, because everything I've learned, there is no risk of this funding going away. And this really comes down to a decision of how do we make this work. I've been told that we're not really interested in the New York way, but we're interested in building the Spokane way. And if that's true, then we need to discuss what the Spokane way looks like and how we actually start moving this through. So Justin, you seem to have some good perspectives on this. And once you're done, I'd like the Prosecutor Haskell to weigh in. And then Amy, I believe you at the district court level would be the one to finish up that discussion. So if we could make it flow that way, I'd appreciate it. So Justin?
Thanks, Sheriff. Yes, as I had stated earlier, after Maggie left, I'm sort of the liaison with our core team that's been working on this since about 2015 with the foundation. And I've had several calls with Vera, because that's just what Maggie did to keep them updated on our progress. And last week we had a call from the foundation wanting to really talk about a couple of issues, because they were also contacted by the press because of this article that was going to run, and they wanted to get some insights on why they were being contacted. And in all honesty, Sheriff, what they really are worried about is that we need to do something. We put forward a plan that says we're going to use the supported release model from New York City, which really focuses on the support being funded through third-party entities, nonprofits. That has run into some resistance from the civil department of the prosecutor's office because of concerns over risk. So the county commissioners have not been able to agree to do that model because of that legal analysis. So I think you're exactly right, Sheriff. What we have to do is come up with an alternative plan, because that's what the foundation really said that they needed, was something from us. Because as of right now, they have not received, nor have we sent any type of indication to them that we have an alternative. And so that's really what they wanted to hear from us, was what is your alternative? Because your funding, which a lot of funding is involved in this, as the paper indicated, around $300,000, is really tied to implementing the model that we said we were going to implement. So if we can't implement that, what else are you going to use that $300,000 for? And so that's what the conversation has to be, is how do we, sort of change, and people on call I was on this last week told me I was using this word too much, but I think it's important to use, how do we pivot what we're doing? We got to keep moving forward, but how do we do it? The foundation is not going to, take away the funding just because of our slowness, but I think they are getting a little frustrated. I don't think there's anger there, but I think there's frustration, and rightfully so, because we're well into a year into a 2-year grant cycle and we haven't launched a program yet. So they're willing to work with us. They're willing to look at alternatives, but we have to actually propose an alternative. So I think that's really where we're at, Sheriff, is we're at one of those junctures. We have to decide which way we want to go. And if we decide to go a particular way that's different than what we've put in the grant, we have to make that request to the foundation, and they'll, review it and determine if they think it's feasible or not. So I think we're not in any type of danger of losing the funding, but the funds are just not going to be used for anything. The grant fund our funding cycle ends at December 31st of this year. The foundation made no assurances that they would consider extending that, but they also seem to be willing to discuss other options if we had a feasible plan forward. So that's what I would add for the group's discussion.
Okay. Justin, you mentioned we're in year 2 of this cycle.
That's correct. So the first year was really supposed to be about really getting the program up and running, and then we should be operational by now. We have not done fully that first part because there was this question as to whether or not there was a risk issue for the county to take this on. So we've really not gotten past first base on this particular issue.
Okay. Larry?
Thank you for the opportunity, Sheriff. Yeah, there was the holdup from the liability perspective, and I discussed this not only with the civil side, but also with the risk manager. And the view was that the court rule 3.2 contemplates and the case law requires that the courts make a record of the reasons for conditions and restrictions and requirements that the court orders. But the supported release plan, as we had originally proposed to do it, would have the court basically turn over this absolute authority to supervise the defendants while they're out on release, and provide that to a non-accountable agency who has the authority under the current pamphlet that was put out to impose conditions of its own and not even be required to inform the court, much less would they be ordered by the court. In fact, the process works that it can't even be raised by anybody but the public defender. The judge can't raise the issue, the prosecutor can't raise it. So my understanding, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail yet because the Board of County Commissioners may not have actually made this a final decision yet, but my civil side advises me that they are looking at another way to address the liability in-house as they see the concern there. And there will be something forthcoming from the board. And I'm sure that'll be in the near future. And I will make sure I express the sentiments that Justin just listed of the foundation, referencing the timing and putting forward a plan. I think the board is ready to act on that in the very near future and address that issue that has been a concern of the county, and hopefully put forward a plan that MacArthur will think is a good idea as well. And also, we still need to address the sustainability issue on that. All this has to do with sustainability. In fact, it was my understanding, and this is maybe dated, Justin, that MacArthur wanted to see sustainability ahead of time, or has that philosophy changed over the period of the last few years?
Larry, I think you're exactly right. One of the things that I have learned about Maggie's job is that she was on a myriad of different phone calls with different entities that MacArthur has you work with. And one of those phone calls that I was on this last week was their sustainability planning that they provide. So it appears as though MacArthur is trying to provide some type of at least resource to individuals like us, Spokane County, that's about to sort of rotate off of their funding. So I was very interested to hear what they had. And they are essentially, I went through all the programs, essentially what we just did. And they are now going to provide us with some type of report as to options on other places that we can try to find funding, grant opportunities, state opportunities, et cetera, where they feel like it could help us supplement local dollars. But Larry is right. They do want to know about sustainability and any plan that we put forward. And that has always been one of our Achilles heels here in Spokane. And we've talked about it time and time again, but anything that we put forward to the foundation will have to address, is there a commitment by this body or bodies plural to fund these programs going forward?
Your Honor.
Thank you. And so I think one of the first things I want to talk about is the history of the supported release program, because unfortunately we don't have Maggie here to set the background for this conversation. I was brought in to join this conversation, and I think it was approximately spring of last year that there was this proposal for the supported release program. It was really going to be directed towards the district court, and would the judges be interested in it? So I took that proposal to my bench. They unanimously supported it. And so we began to enter into conversations between spring and September, when the BOCC meeting was held, which was one referenced in the paper. What occurred was monthly at a minimum meetings with stakeholders as to the viability of a supported release program. And upwards until August or September, the three main concerns that were voiced from the prosecutor's office was, one, they didn't think that the program could be successful based on historical experience. Two, they did not believe that the prosecutor's office was a necessary party to supported release, because ultimately it's the court's orders. The prosecutor's role is to make their recommendations of release. The defense's role is to make their recommendations for release. And it's ultimately the court's order as to what that release will be. And then the third question was the judges, I suppose it could be couched in concerns about the court's orders. It was conceded in those discussions that the prosecutor's office was not a necessary party, because essentially they're right. These are the court's orders. In terms of concerns about 3.2, initially, even the public defenders had some concerns about, from their perspective, the Constitution 1 requires a presumption of innocence, and Court Rule 3.2 specifically identifies what a court can order to those folks who are sitting pre-trial with that presumption of innocence that exists. And so the defense was concerned we would be ordering too much in violation of those rights. And at the end of the day, when the court came back and assured them that, just like our pretrial orders now, they would be appropriate within those constraints, the public defenders came on board. At the end of the day, if either side disagrees with the court's orders because it violates a constitution or court rule right, they can appeal us, and they have. And that's the check on whether or not a pretrial release condition is appropriate or not. In late summer, August, September, the objections to supported release changed from the prosecutor's office. And within a month, it became an argument about liability. And I guess the feedback from the district court is that we recognize and admit there potentially is liability there, but how do we figure out a way to limit that liability or to extinguish that liability? That we have not seen to date. And so that's why it ultimately got to the point where I had to even go in front of the BOCC, because we were not seeing an analysis of that, that would resolve that. It then pivoted to, well, it's going to go in-house into pretrial services. And I think pretrial services has some very valid concerns about taking that responsibility up. The district court judges are still of the position that something is better than nothing. And we would like to see that, if that's the way that we decide that that's the way it's going to go, have something that we can utilize. But at the end of the day, supported release exists in this community. The judges just met with Excelsior yesterday. They presented at our stakeholder meeting, and Excelsior does a supported release program. We met with Dylan Ramirez, who's their supported release specialist. Within their programming, they also provide bail assistance with the bail program. So their supported release is really posting that bail and then working with those individuals to ensure that they get to court. They work with Goodwill Services, United Gospel Mission, additional shelters to housing, to address housing concerns. They interview the defendants every Friday. They do check-ins with the defendants. They do case management with them. They remind the defendants of their court hearings. They provide transportation to their appointments. They get them hooked up with DSHS assistance, Molina. They provide cell phone services, and they work with pretrial services. They're also working with Geiger, with Linda Gertner, in terms of the bail project there. So they have 29 participants. They've been in effect since May, I believe, of 2020. They have their program is set to potentially end May of 2022, depending on how successful it is or is not successful. But of their 25 or 26 participants that they're working with, they have, I think it was a 90% success rate in terms of return to court and recidivism. So, you know, I thought that one of the interesting things in meeting with them yesterday and having them come to the bench was that in theory, this has been tried in our community. It's just been tried in a way I don't think any of us necessarily knew about it. It's a private venture. You know, it's working. And so, you know, however we determine to go forward, that's, you know, that's where the bench is not worried about 3.2 considerations. You know, judges still maintain the discretion to, if they do an analysis and they feel a person is moderate to high risk, to keep those folks in on bail. But how do we, aside from just releasing folks to the community, how do we release those folks where the issue really is failure to appear? Because when you're looking at people on low bonds, less than 5,000, for the most part, you're talking about nonviolent offenders who have a significant failure to appear rate. How do we solve that problem? Because even if they post bond, we're still not solving that problem. They're still going to get out and not have a ride to court, or not have a housing and take all their time up trying to figure out where they're going to sleep at night, as opposed to paying attention to when their court dates are. And so it's in addition to all of the other options that the bench has at their discretion in terms of determining how to release folks. And so that's, I think, where some of the frustration is coming from our bench. We see the time clicking by, and we recognize the challenges that Cheryl's office has voiced, but our position is still that this is a worthwhile endeavor, and it's something that we think could be a complement to the pre-existing options that we have.
Okay.
I would also say that, you know, the idea that, or the concern, and it was voiced by Mr. Phelps, that, you know, for example, the example given, you know, we can order, if you order them to mental health treatment, there's no one who's to ensure that they actually go to that treatment. That's a red herring, because we are not constitutionally allowed to order them pretrial to any treatment, because they're presumed innocent. We can't order them to SUD treatment. We can't order them to mental health treatment. We can, within a very small confines, utilize our pretrial release conditions under the court rules. So those aren't even available to us under any realm that we might be considering. So, you know, that's really something I think the judges are very well aware of as well. Is it may be great if we could, but we couldn't order treatment anyway. That's not going to solve the issue of how do we get those folks out on low bonds, and solve the issue of how do we get them to come back to court. Well, not in a pretrial status. Post disposition is totally different, but pretrial.
All right. Chief Simmons, I see your hand up.
Sorry, Sheriff,
Dave?
that must have been a mistake. I apologize.
I can tell you that I'm less than enthused by the way the reporter, quite frankly, was dishonest with me concerning this issue. And I believe it was a disservice to this community, the way that report or that article was written. I'm going to, Judge Maurer, with your permission, since this is really one that is going to end up in your wheelhouse, should we be successful. I want to take lead on this project. And Cheryl, I'm going to ask you to meet with me, and so I can understand the issues that you see from your end. I'll be meeting with Steve Bartell, and these are the people I'm going to ask to actually work on this with me, to try to clear up the understanding on the liability issues. And Larry, could you assign one of your prosecutors to act as a legal advisor for my little group here?
Sure will.
All right. Justin, you want to be part of this discussion? I know I've got you on the bylaw committee, and you're picking up slack from Maggie and everything. So,
You know, Sheriff, I'd be more than glad to participate, mostly for the institutional knowledge that I bring with the work with MacArthur. I know that you know, as a city actor, I'm sort of outside the realm, but as someone that's involved in this, as well as a citizen of the county, I think this is important to get it right. So I'd be more than glad to help out.
okay. And John Haley, could I trouble you to assist with citizen input and on this one, and make sure that the citizens on the board are kept up to speed?
Yes, sir.
All right, that gives me a group of 5, and I that's big enough to work on the issue. Justin, I just want to make sure that I understand something though. December 31st is kind of our drop dead date on this, correct?
As of right now, our grant extends through December 31st. So all of those projects that we outlined today that go under the MacArthur umbrella, that funding will cease on December 31st. We have received extensions on our 2 previous grants because things were still being implemented. So it's not, you know, out of the realm of possibilities that they would extend if we requested, but there would have to be a real good faith basis that we're, you know, engaged in the work, that we're doing something, and as Larry brought up, that we have a sustainability plan beyond the grant cycle. So right now, yes, December 31st, but you know, it depends on what we bring to the foundation, if they would entertain any type of extension beyond that.
Okay. I will have my staff assistant reach out to you all and try to get a meeting together within the first week and a half after this meeting, so we can sit down. Justin, if you could be prepared to give us the historical background and help us think about the path forward. Think about your advice on how we move this thing forward under the constraints that Larry has echoed today, what the judge has echoed today. Make sure that we're not crossing into any areas. And quite frankly, since Judge Maurer mentioned that Accessler is kind of already doing this, do we really need to recreate the will, or can we fold this under that umbrella? I mean, seems like a very easy, quick fit to the problem. I see 2 hands, Mike, and then I'll get with you, Judge. Mike, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Judge or Sheriff, this project would fall under the MacArthur Foundation,
Right.
which is in under my you know, my direction. So I'd be happy to work with you on it. And you know that this is a MacArthur Foundation project, not a SRLJC project. So, but I'd be happy to help with that part of it as well. So
I'll put you on the list too. I'm kind of making this one of my last projects I'll work on.
understandable, and I think it's a worthwhile one too. So
All right, Your Honor. You're
Oops,
muted.
muted. Here we go. One of the concerns I did want to raise that I can represent that the judges shared, as well as this was, in the conversations that I had with Maggie, and maybe that's been resolved with Justin's conversations with the MacArthur Foundation at this point. But I think part of the interest in utilizing community providers is that, right or wrong, good or bad, there's an inherent mistrust with users of the criminal court system, with in-house providers. And so I think that was one of the reasons why there was interest in utilizing community providers to provide that support, those supports. The concern that came out of changing sort of the recipes for the program is that the New York model had been successful, and that their recidivism rates were successful with this recipe that they had created. And so one of the things that the judges are concerned about is if we dramatically change the ingredients, that it would be unfortunate if down the line it's not successful, but potentially it's because we changed the ingredients for how we put the cake together, so to speak. And so I think there's, if there's a way to find a way to partner with Excelsior, just like we partnered with Pioneer, for example, on the crisis stabilization unit, and limit that liability, because we've seen that same sort of thing happen with the cell phone reminders. The court was doing that long before the public defenders did that, long before the blueprint came in, or the MacArthur Foundation gave grant money. The court was sending court reminders. We got that programming free through the folks actually who provides our debit card process. But we did not have a real great success rate. And it's because when those defendants saw those calls coming in, or those text messages coming in from the court, they either didn't, care about it, they were worried about it, they were scared, whatever it was, they didn't respond to it. But when the same thing, just a text message reminding them to come to court, is sent from their public defender, they read them, they respond to them, and they engage with them. And so, why that is, that's probably something for a social scientist to study. But there's something there. There's something there, I think, in terms of this success that we hope to achieve with this program, and how it might be affected by the providers that we bring in to work with those groups of people. And so one of the other things about Excelsior that I thought was so interesting, and outside of meeting them yesterday, I don't have any vested interest in using them or not using them, but I was really surprised to see that they have really changed their program there. I always thought of them as like a youth at risk kind of a facility, but they actually have, over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 years, extended their programming for a full continuum of care, they call it. So they have medical providers, they have a clinic there, they have the SUD treatment, they have the mental health treatment, and they really are focused on providing supports for populations that are struggling as the whole person. So might be something worth looking into, since they have that infrastructure in place.
All right. Excuse me. The one thing that you mentioned is the data coming out of New York on this project. I've heard mixed opinions on that. And quite frankly, I would like to see, and Candace, maybe you could do this for us. If you could pull the data from the MacArthur Foundation or any other data, maybe from New York, as to the success of this model, I'd really like to see it, because one of my staff actually asked for that data at one point, was never given it. And it wasn't just asked for once, it was asked for multiple times. So maybe we could take a look at what the empirical evidence is showing and go from there, because I can tell you that in other arenas that I've talked to people about the New York bond projects and things like that, they are not seeing any good results coming out of that. As a matter of fact, many people blame New York's crisis in crime right now due to these concepts. So I would really, really like to see whatever data that can be provided to us as to, a counter to that, because again, in other arenas, I'm not hearing that. But I would like to get this thing moving forward if it is a viable program. Folks, we're closing in on 1:20 now, and I know most of you have other things that have to do, maybe get on a bench or something. So I'm going to go around the table right now and go ask this one question. Does anybody have any burning issue you want to chat about right now? If not, again, Mike, what I need from you is kind of a white paper on the project list that Karen brought up, and then the bylaws team to continue to work on that direction. And within a week and a half, I will meet with the people that we identified to work on this release program. And Justin, I don't want to overstep bounds on anything here, but maybe over the weekend or before the weekend, could you maybe just give me a call, and so you and I can talk a little bit more in depth about this, so I can get up to speed, because I really don't know much about this, how we ended up right here.
For sure, Sheriff. And I just sent Candace Aguirre an email asking her to reach out to Vera, because I believe they'll be able to pull that data, because New York gave us some reports before we went to the site visit back in 2019 to look at this. And I don't know what I did with those reports, but I know that they were able to access them before we went for our site visit. So I've reached out to her to hopefully get Vera to give us that information, because I think they still have that, hopefully, fingers crossed. But I can touch base with you. I'll contact your assistant.
I'd really appreciate it, because I'm starting at ground zero on this one, and I need to get brought up to speed really quickly. So again, anybody have anything burning you want to chat about? All right, do I have a motion to close?
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Second.
All right, anybody opposed? All right, let's call it. Thanks, folks. Appreciate it.